As somebody who has played ESO casually as a mostly solo player on and off for nearly a decade, I can genuinely say that I believe that Elder Scrolls Online is the perfect game for those looking for a chill MMO without the stress of needing the best gear, the best stats, or the need to find people to group up with. I mean, of course, if you want to min-max, then you can definitely do that, but personally, I've never really cared too much for min-maxing my gear, getting to the top of the leaderboards, or really doing much of the group or PvP content in the game. I've always played ESO as a mostly solo player doing just the PvE content, with the only times that I've actually grouped up with someone outside of, group dungeons to do quests or anything is with my girlfriend. ESO is a very unique MMO that has changed a ton over the years. Released back in 2014, ESO had a bit of a mixed reaction at first. Even from me as a huge fan of the Elder Scrolls series since Morrowind, I was a bit hesitant because while the concept of an Elder Scrolls MMO sounds amazing on paper, it sounded impossible for anyone to actually create a game that had the same amount of depth and interactivity as an Elder Scrolls game. After all, I, like many people, wanted another Elder Scrolls game and not really an MMO. But over time, with ZeniMax getting rid of the subscription requirement, the insanely important Tamriel update that completely overhauled the entire game to make ESO feel a lot more like an Elder Scrolls game than your typical MMO, as well as the newly added subclass feature that adds a little bit of the class flexibility that we've seen from Skyrim, alongside many more updates and changes to the game that have shaped ESO into the game that it is today, I can say that as a long-time fan of this series, I genuinely think that ESO is the perfect MMO for me as a casual solo player, with the closest second probably being Warframe. Real quick though, before I continue, I do want to give Bethesda and ZeniMax a big shout out for gifting me a code to get me up to date on all the newer content in the game to help me with not only making this video, but many more ESO videos to come out in the future. Also, I'll be talking a little bit more about the new content and the updates that were recently added to the game at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around for that. Anyways, ESO is pretty unique in that it actually works well for everyone, regardless of what your playstyle is. If you want to group up with 12 guild members and raid massive dungeons, world bosses, or even gather together and create an army in the PvP zone of Cyrodiil to smash through other players and use catapults and trebuchets to break into castle walls and take over forts, then you can do that. If you want something that is a bit smaller scale with a similar dungeon and PvP focus, then there's group dungeons, which consist of 4 players, or you can even jump into the battlegrounds for the PvP content, where 2 teams will compete in your typical death matches or even some other fun challenges that remind me of something from the old Halo custom game days, like Capture the Relic, which is essentially Capture the Flag, Chaos Ball, which is where the team that can hold onto the ball the longest to get the most points wins, or Crazy King, which is a lot like King of the Hill, where you try to capture and hold various capture points on the map that move around to new locations after being captured. But what if you're more of a casual player that prefers to play alone, or you simply don't like competitive gameplay? Then don't worry, Elder Scrolls Online feels like it was literally designed for people like us. If you want to kick back, relax in one of the many towns in the game, and roleplay with your friends, then there are a lot of ways to do so. Also, if you are more into collecting items or designing your character to look the coolest that you possibly can make it look, similar to the fashion frames in Warframe, then there's a lot of outfit pieces that you can create. If you enjoy crafting, then there are multiple crafting skill trees, from blacksmithing and enchanting to cooking and even crafting furnitures for housing. And speaking of housing, if you're a person that enjoys player housing and customizing your own living space or even a guild house, then you could do that as well. The game even has fishing for those who just want to kick back and try and catch all the rare fish or ingredients to craft, sell, or simply collect. And of course, while all that is fun, the one thing that I know we are all going to really focus on is the PvE system in the game, which I believe is where the game really does shine. You see, ESO has some of the best quests in any MMO that I have ever played. Trust me, I've played WoW in the past, and before anybody goes down in the comments to start yelling at me, I'm not saying that WoW is bad by any means. It's just, for me personally, I have had a hard time getting interested in the quests in that game. They were mostly just walls of text that you had to read through, and at a certain point, I just started clicking through them just so I can go out and fight stuff for XP or for the rewards. But in ESO, all of the quests are voiced outside of the obvious ones being, if the quest is written on a note or something. If you talk to an NPC in ESO, they will be voiced, which is a very nice touch. But on top of that, with ESO being built upon an already massive amount of lore from all the other Elder Scrolls games, there's a lot of things that Elder Scrolls fans will recognize, and there's a ton of depth and ways that the quests connect in very interesting ways, which makes the questing experience just so good. I've even created new characters in ESO simply just to go back and redo some of the quests to relive some of the experiences, because so many of the quests and the characters themselves are just so interesting. Razumdar and Darien are two characters that you will meet very early on in the game depending on which faction that you choose to start with, and these two characters are still two of my favorite characters to this day across any Elder Scrolls game, alongside Sir Cadwell, of course. You can't really forget Cadwell. Speaking of the factions, the way that the main quest works in ESO's base game is there are 3 main factions that you can choose to join whenever you create a character. These, of course, just like any of the content in ESO, are completely optional and you don't technically have to do them, but they are great and I highly recommend doing them, especially considering that doing so will give you extra skill points that'll help you out later on. Each one of these faction quest lines are actually pretty long as well. I'd say if you're playing through them while doing, you know, a little bit of other things like little side quests and stuff, one faction quest line is probably going to take you around 50 hours. And if you want, you can actually do the other 2 faction quest lines on the same character as well, which means just from that alone, you're looking at a ton of hours just from the faction quests alone, not including any of the side quests. And while these are technically kind of main quests in the game, there's actually another main quest line as well, which is confusing to think about, but basically there's another big quest line that acts as an overarching main quest line to the 3 faction quest lines. It can be done separately, but it does connect the endings of the 3 faction quest lines. So even though you don't need to play through these faction quest lines, I definitely recommend doing so since the quest lines are really good anyways. So there really isn't much reason not to. And in terms of the exploration, it is very rewarding in ESO. There are so many cool places to visit, points of interest to look at, places to fish or gather some crafting materials, and there's also soloable dungeons, not to mention the group dungeons, which can mostly be done solo as well in the base game if you're strong enough, as long as the dungeons don't have a 2-player mechanic to open up a locked gate or something. There's also these things called sky shards, which are shards of ethereal magic that carry the essence of Nirn within them. And while exploring, you will come across these fragments glowing throughout the world, and when you collect 3 of them, it will provide you with an extra skill point, which you can then use to level up one of your skills, regardless of if it's a class skill, a crafting skill, guild skill, or anything else. You can also find chests full of loot and go treasure hunting if you feel like doing that. Plus, with the game being an Elder Scrolls game, you can't really forget the immersive additions to exploration that bring the gameplay closer to what you would expect from an Elder Scrolls game. Almost every single object can be interacted with, such as crates and barrels, random items like food or weapons that you can find lying around on a table. All of that can be picked up. You can even sneak around and break into people's houses or pick people's pockets, and there's even an entire criminal system for those who get caught stealing or performing necromancy outside the local tavern. All of which, again, can be done completely solo, and it's entirely optional since the game allows you to play however you want. Not to mention that the entirety of the map for ESO can be fully explored right out of the tutorial at level 1 thanks to the Tamriel update that was introduced back in 2016, which completely overhauled the way that the game's leveling and scaling system worked to allow you to be able to take on any quest that you want regardless of your level. You will, of course, have some areas that will be a little difficult to do at low levels just because of the lack of skills that you have available to help you, but you will be able to do them regardless. And that isn't even scratching the surface of the base game, let alone all of the newer content that has been added from all of the new updates and expansions over the years. The first DLC for ESO, which was released on August 31st, 2015, was the Imperial City DLC, which added a ton of new PvP content, while also adding more PvE gameplay into the mix, which of course I haven't really touched much since, although I think that the PvP system in ESO is cool, it's not really my cup of tea. The second DLC that was released in 2015 was the Orsinium DLC, which was a pretty huge deal because not only did it add in a brand new zone to explore, a new lengthy quest line involving rebuilding a city which will visually change in-game as you actually complete the quest, which is really cool, and a lot of new gear to collect. But it was also technically the beginning of a very lengthy storyline that spanned across multiple DLCs from the Morrowind chapter that was released back in 2017 all the way to the Somerset chapter that was released in 2018. Also, I'm not going to spoil anything, and I ask that anybody who knows what I'm about to talk about, please don't spoil it for anyone in the comments. But during the Orsinium questline, you'll find yourself in a library at some point looking for a book, and while doing so, you will find a secret about Darien from the Daggerfall Covenant's questline, as well as the overarching main questline that absolutely blew my mind when I first saw it, and it still gives me shivers whenever I come across it today. But I'm going to leave that for you guys to discover. Just trust me, it's worth it. Other notable DLCs were, of course, the Thieves Guild and Dark Brotherhood, which added in new zones, new quests, and dailies to complete. The Elsewhere chapter, which added in dragons and the Necromancer class, which is awesome. The Blackwood chapter, which added companions to the game so that you socially anxious gamers out there, such as myself, can recruit an NPC to help us in more of the PvE content, making soloing the game even easier. The Necrom chapter, which added in the Arcanist class, and the Infinite Archive, which is a very unique take on dungeons in an MMO, as it is an endless dungeon that is entirely randomized with some roguelike-ish kind of mechanics, which does go back to what I was saying earlier about the game having a little bit of everything regardless of what kind of casual player that you are. So you technically could play the Infinite Archive and nothing else if you wanted to do that. I haven't really gotten around to checking it out just yet, but from what I have seen from it, it does appear to be very in-depth with a lot of rewards that you can obtain from it as well. And finally, the latest DLC and update, which not only does away with the previous yearly chapter releases that ESO has been doing, that has now been replaced with the content passes, which I'm going to go over in a little bit because I promise it's not like season passes in other games, but it also added subclassing, which means that you now have more freedom with how you build your character, similar to how it was in Skyrim. So to quickly explain subclassing, basically when you get to level 50, which also unlocks the champion point system, you will also unlock subclassing for the character after you complete a short quest for it. With subclassing, you'll be able to use skills from 3 skill trees. One of those skill trees will have to be from your character's main class, but the other 2 skill trees can be from any of the other classes in the game. However, you do need to first max out a character of that chosen class's skill tree in order to unlock it. Luckily, whenever you do unlock anything in ESO, like gear sets or skill trees, it does become unlocked across the entirety of your account rather than just the one character. Which means that if you max out a character, that character's skill trees from its chosen class will now be unlocked for any of your future characters that you create once that new character reaches level 50. Although, one other thing that I want to note with the system is that all skills through the subclassing feature will level up a little bit slower, which isn't a huge deal thanks to the training gear and XP scrolls that you can get as daily login rewards, as well as events, which usually have some sort of pretty massive XP boost. But also, these skills will come at a cost of 2 skill points to unlock on your character instead of the normal 1 skill point for skills that are native to your character's class. Meaning that if you want to use a sorcerer's skill on a Nightblade, that sorcerer's skill is going to cost 2 skill points to unlock rather than 1. But if you are questing and exploring, which I'm assuming that you probably will be doing, considering that you're most likely a casual solo player like me, you will have a ton of extra skill points to use, so this likely won't be an issue either. Plus, if you do make any mistakes or anything, you can always respec for a little bit of gold to get all those skill points back, so. Earlier I mentioned how ESO's chapters have been swapped out for content passes as of the new Seasons of the Worm cult content that was recently added, which expands upon the base game's main storyline. Now, when I first saw that ZeniMax was calling it content passes, I was a bit confused and worried that they were going to go with the season pass approach, but luckily that is not what this is. You see, in the past there was yearly chapters, but during that year there was also DLCs that either expanded the chapter or added in new dungeons, which of course was released over the course of a year. But with the new content pass, it is basically a one-time fee where you purchase the pass and it permanently unlocks all of the content that is releasing that year. And that does not mean that you will lose access to that content after the year is up. Once you pay for that content pass, everything that is covered by that content pass is fully unlocked forever. Or at least until the ESO servers shut down, of course, which hopefully will never happen. There's a ton of new content that is being added throughout this year from that content pass, which expands upon the base game's storyline and introduces a new zone for us casuals to explore, which is very awesome. And later this year, there's also going to be a Writhing Wall event, which is a huge event that will involve all of the players on the server trying to break through a massive magical wall that separates the two sides of the newly added zone, which will then expand the questline even further and add even more PvE content to explore. And while this event is a massive server event involving players joining together, you can still do everything solo, of course, as far as I'm aware, and if you don't want to participate at all, then there will be a separate story quest for those who don't participate, which you can do to get through the wall as well. If you don't already play ESO and you want to jump into it, then you can actually get the base game pretty cheap on sale. I think it usually goes on sale for about $5, but if you do want access to all of the previous chapters as well as the newest content, then you can pick up the premium edition of ESO for $80, which is pretty expensive, but it does include all of the previous chapters outside of a few DLCs. Like, I don't think that it includes Murkmire or a few of the other ones, which kind of sucks, but even with the base game alone, you're looking at hundreds of hours of playtime on a single character, so I'd say that if you enjoy Elder Scrolls lore and MMOs, then you will likely find that the game is more than worth it. I mean, there is a reason that this game is my most played game on Steam after all. But whether you're a casual solo player like myself, just wanting to do some questing, some exploration, and maybe some fishing, or if you enjoy chatting with the community, forming guilds, and going on massive raids, ESO has an insane amount of really good content regardless of your playstyle in games like this. So to answer the question, is ESO worth playing as a casual solo player? Well, I'm sure that the answer is pretty obvious. I mean, with all the stuff that I mentioned in the video of all the different things that you can do as a solo casual player in ESO, it's kind of hard to say that this wouldn't be the case. This game is quite literally made for people like us, even with it being an MMO. So again, regardless of what playstyle that you actually enjoy, this game really does have a little bit of everything for everybody. Although I will say that if you are more of a MMO player and you don't really play like Elder Scrolls games, then it might throw you off a little bit. And the same thing goes for if you don't play MMOs, but you do play a lot of Elder Scrolls games. It doesn't exactly play like an Elder Scrolls game, but there is a lot of similarities to it. But even with all of that, it still is a ton of fun. And I'm sure that most of you guys will enjoy this. But anyways, what are you guys' thoughts on ESO? Do you currently play it, or have you been thinking about picking it up? If you do play, then I'm curious to hear what skill tree combinations that you plan on creating with the new subclassing edition. Also, let me know, are you a casual solo player, or do you prefer min-maxing and playing with groups of people? It goes without saying that I'm a big Elder Scrolls fan, so I do have some other videos up if you guys want to check those out, and I plan on making many more videos over the series in the future, alongside some hopefully unique ideas that I have for ESO videos. I kind of just make whatever type of videos that I feel like making on this channel, but most of my videos that aren't just me exploring quest mods or doing challenges in Elder Scrolls or Fallout games usually involve me checking out or giving my opinions on a random RPG or horror game. That being said, Elder Scrolls will likely always be a staple of this channel, so if you do enjoy the video and you would like to see more ESO or random Elder Scrolls stuff in the future, then consider leaving a like and subscribing, as I am a small and growing channel on YouTube, and it would mean a lot to me if you did. But with all that said, I hope that you guys did enjoy, and I hope to see you all in the next video of whatever I decide to make. Good night, guys.